1941. Much of the European continent has been devoured by the German Wehrmacht. Of those opposing the Nazi war machine, only Britain and the Commonwealth are left actively fighting. The Third Reich stretches from the Atlantic in the west to Ukraine in the east. But Hitler is looking even further eastward. Operation Barbarossa, a colossal strike against the Soviet Union, is next on Hitler's dance card, and distractions are unwanted. There's just one problem with distractions. Often, they are beyond your control. I'm Indy Neidell, and welcome to another World War II in real-time miniseries. Today, we're kicking off a story that starts as a distraction, a sideshow, but rapidly explodes into one of the great theaters of the war, North Africa. Over the coming weeks, we'll recap its beginnings, then see the arrival of the Germans, the first lightning strikes of the Desert Fox Erwin Rommel, and the opening shots of the siege of Tobruk, week by week in real time. Today is just a quick overview of the situation and why German soldiers even end up there in the first place. By 1941, Germany is no longer fighting alone. Italy's leader, Benito Mussolini, wishing to share Hitler's mounting successes, joins the war on June 10, 1940. But while things are still going pretty well for Germany, setbacks such as the ongoing Battle of Britain aside, for Italy it is another story. It starts out well enough. In East Africa, the Royal Italian Army makes quick advances, pushing all Commonwealth forces from British Somaliland by August 19th. The Italians even advance into Egypt. Okay, that advance lasts just 3 days, but they nevertheless make it 80 to 100 kilometers into Egyptian territory. However, Marshal Rodolfo Graziani, both Italy's Army Chief of Staff and commander in North Africa, knows that he cannot push any further. The terrain, the sweltering desert, the logistics of advance are too great to overcome. Any further push from Sidi Barrani to Mersa Matruh needs good roads to haul water and fuel. This, however, is not really a problem for the British in Egypt, whose supply lines are short and well maintained and even include a railway. Graziani wants to establish a firm defensive base as a launching point for the future, which according to some accounts also includes a motorized brothel. The general situation changes rather quickly though. In Benito Mussolini's words, as recorded by his son-in-law Galeazzo Ciano, "Hitler keeps confronting me with a fait accompli. This time, I shall pay him back in his own coin." He refers here to the sudden German military presence in Romania, of which he was not informed in advance. What's his play to be then? Greece, of course. As for why, there are reasons besides jealousy. See, Mussolini is inspired by the Roman Empire. What was part of the Roman Empire? Greece and the Balkans, as well as North Africa. Once all fall under Mussolini's control, the Mediterranean will once more become the Mare Nostrum, our sea, ruled from Rome. Also, much like with Norway, Britain's Royal Navy and Air Force might use Greece as a staging area and supply depot, and thus it needs to fall. However, it really seems to have been, at least in part, a spur-of-the-moment decision by Mussolini. He himself knows the Italian military readiness is scheduled for 1943, not 1940. In many ways, the Italian army is less prepared for conflict than it was in 1915 when it entered the Great War. On the 28th of October 1940, Italian forces crossed the Greek-Albanian border. One of Hitler's adjutants reports, "Führer raging when he hears of the Italian attack on Greece and doubts whether Italians can defeat Greece as the Greeks are not bad soldiers in themselves. The F says verbatim, this is their revenge for Norway and France. But he, F, had been forced to act secretly since every second Italian was a traitor or a spy." Not only does Mussolini's invasion enrage Hitler, Hitler even gets the message as to why, more or less. See, he has offered Italy assistance in the shape of panzer units on October 4th, but the Italian General Staff categorically rejects the offer, something they will soon regret. And Hitler's anger soon proves justified, for the Italian campaign in Greece is nothing short of an unparalleled disaster for the Italian army. Within a week, Greek forces pivot from defense to offense. By November 8th, the entire Italian advance has collapsed. Then, on November 14th, a determined Greek counterattack pushes the Italian forces back beyond their original staging area into Albanian territory. Some of you might say, Okay, yeah, the Greek campaign is a disaster for Italy, but at least Graziani still sits comfortably in his defensive positions in North Africa, mechanized brothel and everything, right? Well, yes, but as it turns out, not for much longer. On the 9th of December, some 30 to 36,000 motorized British and Commonwealth troops, supported by 270 tanks, including notably the Matilda II infantry tank, launch Operation Compass. Graziani's defensive perimeter is caught completely by surprise and collapses within 2 days. Some Italian forces, once they realize they've been bypassed and their positions have become untenable, even surrender on the 11th. In just those 2 days, the British Army has captured between 20,000 and 38,300 prisoners, 73 tanks, 237 guns, and over 1,000 transport vehicles. They take just a reported 624 casualties themselves. And the Matilda shows real capabilities. Its armor is in some places up to 78 millimeters thick, and it's sloped, so it makes Italian anti-tank gunners feel they're attacking an elephant with pea shooters. Nothing Graziani can scramble together is capable of inflicting anything other than minor scratches and dents on these machines. By this point, Italy is entirely and unquestionably screwed. Suffering defeat after defeat in the Balkans and North Africa, the Italian Royal Army is giving a decent account of itself only in East Africa. Of course, military blunders stretching across 2 continents are not exactly a top-secret affair, and in Berlin, Adolf Hitler has pretty much had it. Already on November 20th, nearly 3 weeks before Compass even begins, he sends Mussolini a letter, and he does not mince words. The situation which has now arisen has very grave psychological and military repercussions, which it is important to understand clearly. Hitler also signals a willingness to help. I should like especially to detail a wing of Junker 88s, as well as the requisite reconnaissance planes, long-range fighters, etc. If we commit our Air Force properly, the Mediterranean will in 3 or 4 months become the grave of the British fleet. Another thing I should mention here is that by this point, Italy's setbacks are not confined to land. The night of the 11th of November, the Battle of Taranto takes place, and the Royal Italian Navy joins the string of Italian failures. 21 Ferry Swordfish torpedo bombers from HMS Illustrious strike the Italian naval base at Taranto in 2 waves. They cripple 3 out of Italy's 6 battleships, Conte di Cavour, which sinks in shallow water, and Littorio and Caio Duilio, severely damaged and out of action for months. This shock prompts the Italians to relocate their capital ships to safer ports, granting the British Royal Navy more freedom to roam the local seas unimpeded. Given all this action, on the 5th of December, Hitler discusses the situation with the commander-in-chief of the German army, Walter von Brauchitsch. Also, Hitler has been repeatedly pestered by Grand Admiral Erich Raeder and Luftwaffe Field Marshal Smiling Albert Kesselring. Both consider removing, or at the very least containing, the possible threats from Greece and Malta as essential from a naval and aerial perspective. And the best way to do that, according to all concerned, is to support Italy. Malta, the British-held island, is a thorn in the side of both Hitler and Mussolini. Nestled right between Sicily and the African mainland, it was from here that RAF planes got the British Royal Navy the intel necessary to do the attack on the Italian ships at Taranto. If left unaddressed, Malta could become a constant threat to any Axis ships in the Mediterranean. So Hitler orders 2 groups of Junker 87s and 2 of Junker 88s, which will become Fliegerkorps 10, sent to Sicily and southern Italy. These planes have 2 main objectives: protect the Romanian oil fields from RAF attacks and establish Axis control over the Mediterranean. For the latter, Malta is to be the primary target. Hitler does tell Brauchitsch that he does not plan on sending any ground troops to North Africa. This assessment is called into question when Operation Compass begins 4 days later. So then, battered, beaten, and in retreat, on December 19th, the Italian High Command officially asks Germany for help. They want a panzer division to be sent to North Africa, which is just what Hitler offered back on October 4th, and the irony is not lost. On the 9th of January 1941, Hitler once more discusses the situation with Brauchitsch. He tells his commander-in-chief that he does not care much for North Africa. Yet there are other considerations which must be made. These are then outlined in Führer Directive Number 22, issued January 11th, concerning the conduct of the war in the Mediterranean area. It reads, "The situation in the Mediterranean requires German assistance for strategic, political, and psychological reasons. Tripolitania must be held, and the danger of a collapse of the Albanian front must be eliminated. I therefore order the following. 1. The commander-in-chief of the army is to form a blocking force, suitable to render valuable services to our ally in the defense of Tripolitania, especially against the British armored divisions." Now, as to just what the strategic, political, and psychological reasons are here, well, first of all, if they don't help out, there is the very real possibility of Italy collapsing, not just further militarily, but also political. And while whatever might follow that is just guesswork, it does not take a genius to know that whatever it may be, it would not be good news for Germany with Mussolini gone. Possibly even a British ally in the form of a new democratic Italy. Moreover, a complete defeat of Italy in Greece and North Africa would also mean a lot of British forces would be free to be deployed elsewhere. Last, and perhaps most importantly in Hitler's mind, it would leave the entire southern flank of any German attack on the USSR wide open. 9 days later, on January 20th, these operations get their official names. First, there is Operation Sonnenblume, or Sunflower, which is the German involvement in Africa. And second is Operation Alpenwäldchen, Operation Cyclamen, which is German support in Albania. Both, for the moment, are purely defensive in nature. In the meantime, Operation Compass has raced further along the North African coast. On December 16th, City Omar is captured in just 10 minutes. Then on the 5th of January, the fortress of Bardia falls, yielding 40,000 more Italian prisoners of war. And by the early hours of the 22nd, Tobruk falls, with another 27,000 Italian POWs. All this, even though Compass seems almost effortless. How come? Well, because Britain has already triumphed in another war, one fought through words and unfolding in the shadows, the War of Cryptography. The British are able to read a bunch of the Italians' military ciphers by this point. Knowing where your enemy is and what he's up to is a huge advantage. Add that to the Italians' inferior equipment and supply chains, and it is not a surprise that the numerically superior Italians are having a rough time. By now, though, some of the German support has already materialized, to the great misfortune of the Maltese. By the end of 1940, the RAF on the island has 63 aircraft total at its disposal, 20 Wellington and 5 Maryland bombers, 12 Swordfish torpedo planes, 6 Sunderland flying boats, and 20 Hurricane fighters. Contrast that with the 250 or so planes 10th Flieger Corps has stationed in Sicily as of January 12th. This includes 12 Junkers 88s for reconnaissance, 129 bombers, HE-111s and Junkers 88s, 80 dive bombers, all Junkers 87 Stukas, and 34 dual-engine Bf-110 fighters. With the decision for German intervention in North Africa, the need to bomb Malta, or at the very least the RAF elements on it, is even more pressing. The German troops need to get to Africa somehow. And that somehow is mostly by boat from Naples to Tripoli. So to ensure a safe passage of German troops to a new theater of war, the RAF on Malta needs to be firmly kept in check. By now, Hitler and Mussolini are likely cursing Italy's failure to attack and seize Malta in 1940, when it would have been way, way easier. The first attacks by German planes against Malta are flown on the 10th of January, and they merely give a taste of what is to come. But what German ground forces will eventually be sent to North Africa? Well, Hitler believes that Italy's failure is largely due to a lack of modern armor-piercing weapons, which is at least partly true considering the Matilda IIs. So the German force sent to Italy will be one mainly consisting of anti-tank, armored, and engineer units. That means tanks, half-tracks, loads of anti-tank guns, more specifically, a hastily thrown together stack of units loosely built around Panzer Regiment 5, itself formerly part of the 3rd Panzer Division. Added to those roughly 150 tanks will be Reconnaissance Battalion 3, Tank Destroyer Battalion 39, along with a bunch of engineer, machine gun, and AA units. All in all, roughly 9,300 German soldiers. It will be designated the 5th Light Division. The tanks are a mix of Panzer Is, IIs, IIIs, and even some IVs, with the main workhorses being the Panzer IIIs. Besides that, the force possesses 111 anti-tank pieces, mainly of the 37 and 50 millimeter caliber, and some German 88s as part of a mixed anti-aircraft group. The Matildas will not have such an easy time contending with the 88s. On February 3rd, Hitler holds the final meeting regarding Operation Sunflower with leading Wehrmacht, Luftwaffe, and Kriegsmarine officers. Begrudgingly, Hitler concludes that Operation Alpenwäldchen must be scrapped before it can begin. This means, though, that an additional entire panzer division can be sent to Africa, the 21st Panzers, although naturally it will arrive much later than the already prepared elements. Another important question to consider is what the Italian plans on the ground are, since the report he receives February 1st is pretty dire. In Tripolitania, Marshal Graziani now had only 4 divisions, without artillery, which were occupied with building defensive positions around Tripoli. But guess what? The already disastrous Italian situation in North Africa continues to worsen. Yep. Between the 4th and the 5th of February, the vanguard of the British 7th Armored Division reaches the coastal road southwest of Beta Foam, an over 800-kilometer advance since Compass began. Not bad. Even better for them, though, with that, the Commonwealth troops have managed to cut off the Italian path of retreat. The fate of the entire Italian 10th Army now hangs in the balance. Given all this, who's to lead the coming German force? Who will be the German Scipio Africanus, destined to sail across the sea, to rid North Africa of Rome's enemies, defending Tripoli and preventing additional British gains? That question is also settled on the 3rd, and it means that one man's holidays will be cut short yet again. Johannes Erwin Eugen Rommel. Late in the evening of the 5th, after 2 days on leave, Rommel is summoned to Berlin to meet Brauchitsch and Hitler personally and to assume his new command. The man originally intended for this command, Hans von Funk, is much too pessimistic for the Führer's liking. Well, okay, Hitler also reportedly personally hates him. Instead, the man who did wonders in France as leader of the 7th Panzer Division, the Ghost Division, Erwin Rommel, had been recommended to him as the man who would most quickly adapt himself to altogether different conditions of the African theater. Von Funk will replace Rommel at 7th Panzer Division. On the evening of the 6th, Rommel pens a letter to his wife. Dearest Lou, things are moving fast, so our leave was cut short again. Don't be sad, it had to be. The new job is very big and important. Then on the 7th, he jots in his diary, slept on my new job last night. It's one way of getting my rheumatism treatment. I've got a terrible lot to do. In the few hours that remain, getting together all I need. There is indeed a terrible lot to do for Rommel. For that very day at dusk, the sun not only sets on the North African desert, but also on the Italian 10th Army. What remains of it surrenders, with its commander, General Giuseppe Tellera, killed in action. This marks the completion of Operation Compass. By February 7th, 9.5 Italian divisions, between 125,000 and 150,000 soldiers, around 400 tanks, nearly 1,300 artillery pieces, over 1,000 trucks, and roughly 1,250 aircraft of all types have been captured or destroyed, removed from the chessboard in the first major British land victory of the war. In other words, if things were bad before for the Italians, now they are nothing short of cataclysmic. Yet, on February 8th, the first elements of the German support force set sail for Africa from the port of Naples. That is where I will wrap up this intro episode. The stage is set, German troops en route to Africa, and Rommel right behind them. What will his first moves be? And what about the Italians? Will they just bow to the German plans, or will they play their own game? The British also need to figure out what to do now, since the Italian threat is mostly vanquished, at least in North Africa. But how soon could a renewed Axis offensive in Africa be expected, even with German support? Wouldn't the troops of Operation Compass have a greater effect elsewhere, like Greece? Oh, To get answers to all this and more, check in next week when we begin following the events as they unfold on the ground week by week. To be part of our continuing adventure, join the Time Ghost Army at timeghost.tv or patreon.com. Only with the army do we stand a chance to win the fight against history fading into the mists of time. Del Turner is the Time Ghost Army member of the week for this channel, or our Africa ally, I guess. Yeah, okay, Africa ally. Let's continue that, right. Do not forget to subscribe. See you next time.